And we're live. Welcome back to the weekly roundup. So nice to see you guys. Maybe you missed it. I've been a little AWOL this week because it's hurricane season and we just got smacked by a category 4. Everyone's okay. Everything's cool, but it just caused a lot of chaos and basically shut down everything in my area, especially because no one thought that the hurricane was going to hit us at first. Very often they turn north before they come into where we are. So this one in particular looked like it was doing that. And then it just turned directly at us and started gaining more power. So everyone went from like, yeah, it's not going to be a big deal. We'll have some rain, like maybe have a sandbag or two around, to being like complete chaos, board everything up, be prepared to, run out of power for a few days, which we did, because if power goes out here and, there's a mountain slide or something, like they can't even get to our town. They go to the city first. So we've just sat around for 48 hours with no power, no cell service, nothing. Everyone was fine. No one in town even got injured. Last year's hurricane was worse. We were shoveling people out for days. This comparatively wasn't good. But what's my point? Why does this matter for you as a yoga studio owner? Well, it made me think of preparedness. And actually, this came up recently. I had an onsite that Carol and I were at, working with Kristen, and we were just talking about some of the details that have previously been overlooked around what's in your terms of service, what's in your, on your website, what's in an auto pay contract, that people would get a copy of. We all know about in your lease having a force majeure clause, but I think that one of the things that COVID, for better or worse, taught a lot of studios was also having a certain level of preparedness around what is your agreement with your clients? What are you going to provide for them? Now, obviously, we want to stay open under all circumstances. You want to always service the clients and give them as much yoga as possible, inclusive of, you got to pivot online, whatever. But having that actually be there in your policies for clarity, so that when you get a curveball, hurricane rolls through and you're like, we're closed for a week, or we got to fix the roof, that suddenly you've already got yourself covered. It doesn't mean that you wouldn't do something or there's never going to be a refund or something around it, but it's more just like you don't feel like you're stuck having to do something for people because you didn't have this established agreement with them. So before we jumped on, we started talking about preparedness in the studio from a lot of different angles. What do you guys see? What are some examples of how you would say for a studio owner to be prepared?
Always having 3 months of running costs. That would be my first one. This is something we talk about and always recommend to everybody. And I don't know how common it is exactly for studios to actually have it.
Not common.
Not so common. No, I don't think so. I mean, recently, I was having a discussion about preparedness here in Sweden with a group of women my age, and it's been National Preparedness Week here. I have never heard of such a thing in my lifetime. But suddenly I saw it as well, all over social media, all over the news, all over posters around town, everywhere. People seem to get involved in this. And these women I was meeting with, they were describing to me how they put some big bags of water frozen in the freezer in case they ran out of water. You should have enough, food and water to last for a week. This was the goal of the government. I mean, I think it's the war in Ukraine that is, we are so close to Russia and people really think about this stuff now, and the government clearly as well. To me, it was a little bit like the Walking Dead sort of scenario that seemed really unreal to me. But hey, I mean, we've all lived through COVID, so we all know that these things that seem so unlikely, they do happen. And specifically, the 3 months of running costs, that was something that broke a lot of studios during COVID that did not have that. I mean, those were the studios that just closed straight away. So I would say that's definitely something to look into, whether you have it or not. Oh, there went Josh.
That's a perfect place for me to mention. Well, it's funny that you mentioned that that's like kind of a new thing in Sweden, Vicky, because here, like in Mexico, you're like always like our water gets shut off like every week. So we're always like, you got to have some water. And then Josh's internet just went out because of because that happens all the time too. So like, yeah, depending where you live, you got to have a plan for like, what is the stuff that could possibly go wrong? Of course, we can't foresee it all. I was just saying, Josh, that was perfect that your internet like cut out.
Yeah, right then my internet cuts down. Vicky's
yeah.
all like, Sweden has National Preparedness Week. And I'm like, in Mexico, gone.
Yeah. And that's what I just said. I'm like, we always have water because that happens like all the time.
All the time.
Yeah. So like, depending on your location, you might have different things that you really need to be prepared for. So it's really good advice to try for the 3 months. But then like, if you can't do the 3 months right now, if you just don't have that kind of rainy day fund, like don't give up, have something. Like better to have, a week than nothing at all, for sure. But how else, like besides just like saving some money, what are other things? And Josh mentioned like your membership agreement. I mean, to make sure that like it's the expectation is understood, that like you can be flexible about how you're offering your services, that you don't need to like, you're not going to pause everybody's membership in case you need to close for a day. I got to mute myself, sorry. In case a kid tries to steal your computer while you're on a Zoom meeting, what do you do? What are some other ways you can prepare yourself?
One thing I'd add, just going to the water comment in Mexico here too. Another thing, I don't know if Kay said this while my internet was down. There's a thing you can prep for. As a coach, you know what we prep for? We prep for internet. I'm like, have multiple internet sources in town in case one of them dies down, because that's literally our connection to everything. So Kay was talking about how in her state, the cost of electricity went up significantly. In Mexico, things don't incrementally go up monthly, they stay the same. And then they just do like this one recalibration moment now and again. And when that happens, it can be very extreme. So for example, electricity, it's done it in the last year here. They also did it with building materials, where like literally all building materials in the country went up by 30% in January. So if you were mid-build and you didn't have your materials, like that stopped people from building. It like made it inaccessible. So beyond the specificity I'm talking about here, if you owned a yoga studio here, having solar panels on the roof and having a large water tank will keep you open when everyone and everything else is closed. And this hurricane we were just in was an example. The next town over, I had to give a friend a ride because their car got swamped in the rain. And the downtown was shut except for 2 restaurants, like a coffee shop and a restaurant, which had their own generator and had a water system. And guess what? They were full, like 100% full, with people in there buying them out of everything they've got. And maybe that's an extreme example, but one of the yoga studios that we managed, I remember there was an enormous snowstorm, like 3 feet of snow, and schools were closed, everything closed. But the studio, just where it was situated, was easy to get to. And we had a snowplow on a buddy's truck. So we were the only place that was open. So guess what? Like all the classes were full that weekend, like to the brim, and people were calling, are you open? Because it was the only thing to do. So I think there's just the simple preparedness relative to where you are, to just, the idea of like the class must go on sort of thing. If your power goes out, like, do you have candles in your studio? Okay, we're doing candlelit yoga sort of thing. Or if a teacher doesn't show up, can you put a TV on? And like, I know that sucks, but like, is there a recorded class you can play? Like that kind of preparedness to just the class must go on, I think has some value as well.
Yeah, you got to have the ability to do that. So I recently talked to some, again, Sweden, like we're a bit extreme. Everything just works too well here. Because I talked to a studio owner about that and saying, like, oh, if the heating breaks and then, you put up you just switch on your backup heaters, don't you? And she said, no, that there's no way we could do that because the ventilation system has to be running. Otherwise, people will not get oxygen in the yoga room. Okay, so if that system breaks, it's broken. Like there's no class. Tough. You're very dependent then on just having the one system.
Right, especially when your whole product is
hot yoga,
an engineered hot yoga room. Yeah. So I mean, you can solve things very simply, but like, okay, if we needed to, how would we run a class with fresh air? Like we got to be able to open a window or whatever. You know, there's solutions, but just thinking that through. Yeah. With most hot studios, there isn't. That's a bit tricky, but Carol, I think, well, I know Vicky, you said you experienced this too. Just taking us in a little different direction. We had a post, and I really appreciate is Jessica Mishu who posted it. I really appreciate this post because it's the type of conversation that doesn't happen publicly. That's like super weird and awkward, and that does happen. The situation, I'll explain in a second, does happen in yoga studios enough that I saw this and I'm like, yep, that's normal. Like totally normal occurrence. Yoga studios, you just, you know, you get to experience a myriad of events that are almost impossible to prepare for. So there's a long-winded way of saying, I think there's also an element of preparedness, not just in your contractual stuff and your policies, but in like you and your team, especially if you have managers or like more regular front desk staff that are helping manage the studio when you're not there. How will you deal with certain situations? And you can't write down every situation, but what you can do is have generalized guidelines for like, how should it feel and be here? Like what's sort of the maintenance bar of acceptability? So Jessica's post was asking the question. She had gone away and came back, and a bunch of teachers and students even had complained. 2 people even left the class because someone was moaning and groaning in their yoga class, making orgasmic noises, which, hey, you can say it.
Yoga feels good.
Yoga feels good. I mean, I wish it felt that good. Can you imagine?
It's so funny.
But
I've had the exact same thing. 2 different people.
We had the same thing.
I think
I've heard
you're
this from
bothered by
multiple
that. You're
studios.
just jealous.
Okay.
Just kidding. It can be distracting, right? It's a real issue.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I had a guy practicing next to me in a yoga class once, and he did not have a condition. Let me be clear. I knew for sure because I did check, but he'd get really upset in class and swear under his breath. And like the instructor would not hear that this was happening. But if you were practicing right next to this person, your whole class were hearing like this weird mumbling and then being like, fucking shit, you know, like we were like, what is going? It was very extreme. He was very upset with himself in this class and his performance around it. So less orgasmic, but still an extreme situation that was impacting the other students around them. I know I must have their own experience, but this would be an example of preparedness. Like Jessica came back and no one knew what to do in this situation. So now it's falling on her and it's coming after the fact. Nothing wrong with that. It escalates to the owner, but how would you prepare yourself and the team in the future to be prepared to deal with a situation like this more in real time so that it doesn't escalate?
So I think the teachers are the best placed to speak to the person. And in my opinion, face-to-face conversation is needed with this person as soon as possible, done in a very kind and empathetic way. And the teacher is kind of the person of authority. I mean, maybe the studio owner, sure, but I think it's just a good idea to train your teachers to be prepared and to be able to do this and to make that the culture in the studio that, you know, you don't need to come crying to the studio owner every time something like that happens. You know, talk to the studio owner, but then it's the job of the teacher to actually speak to the student about it. You know, why we need them to practice in silence, why this is needed for the rest of the class, how we are having a group experience, and how what you do and the noises you make is going to impact other people, to have that first conversation at least. Then if it goes on and it escalates, or they just don't stop, or they don't listen, and you feel like, we've got to do this again, maybe then the studio owner needs to get involved. But yeah, I think in the first instance, it's a good idea for it to be the teacher. I've had this twice, like I said, in my own studio. And one of the times I had to just, had several conversations with the person in question. In the end, just had to say, you cannot do this anymore, or you cannot practice here. And that resulted in him just walking out, immediately sending an email, I cancel my membership. Fine. But yeah, it impacted so many people, and it ruined their experience, and it made other people complain. And, we risked having other people cancel their memberships and not wanting to come to class, and you just can't have it.
Yeah,
it's tricky to keep that in balance.
Yeah. It can come to that. It's a good, important to note that was after like having a conversation and you kind of tried all the other things first and didn't just jump to that, because there's so many other things we can discover in that process, right?
In the first instance, it was like, making light-hearted comments while I was teaching, and kind of making a little joke, and hey, starting kind of very low level, and then it was just so many times trying when it just in the end just came to a head with that.
I think it's a really good idea that it come from the teacher, especially if you as the owner have not actually had that person in your class, and you haven't had that personal experience. And then how do you guide your teachers or your staff to know like what to say? And I was thinking this is a really important use of your core values or core principles, right? And making sure that you talk about those on a regular basis with your team, because then they can, you can't be prepared for every specific situation, but then they can use those core values to help them decide what route to take. So if you've got like be inclusive as one of your core principles, then that can really guide how you frame this conversation. Be fair, whatever your values are, probably as a yoga studio, they're going to help you have a respectful and kind conversation with the students. So just making sure that you talk about those on a regular basis, I think can help with preparing your staff.
I agree. I was going to add to two things that I like this idea of the teacher. It's like the person who's directly involved in a perfect world would be the person who addresses it, and as soon as possible, because if it immediately is addressed in a very positive, sort of like not actually saying anything, just being curious around what's going on with the person and how can we help them succeed at their practice angle, it's easy for it to be very lighthearted and not offensive, and for that conversation to probably result in something really good, or to uncover like a very simple misunderstanding or whatever. But if it like in the situation described, it's like multiple people have now complained, students have left the class, and then it's going to the owner, and it's the time delay between these things that is what amplifies the intensity of what must happen next, basically, which is just a face-to-face conversation, I think, too. The only other thing about preparedness with this, too, is also just having a policy in your studio to have incident reports. So a lot of times with new studios, this is something when we're coaching a studio when they're opening, that we help them get in order. It's like right from day one, have an incident report recorder like prepared, not because you're going to have so many things, but it just really smooths a lot of things out. And like it clarifies, because it takes sort of like a qualitative situation and makes it quantitative. To Vicky's point, you're like, if you have 3 reports written up about the same person, no matter what the situation is, like there's no doubt in your mind what's happened. And you can, it's not even that you have to say that to them, but it's just, it lets you and your team get clear on, okay, maybe it's time that we like push this a bit. And if that means losing this person, it's okay. because this has happened so many times or whatever. Carol, what do you think? I mean, your studio is 20 years. I think clearly you would have, oh, I think Carol froze. Now Carol's internet's down. There we go. I was gonna ask Carol, for 20 years in studio ownership, like I know that she's seen all of it out there, but we'll let her come back afterwards. Okay, specifically addressing this issue, I think face-to-face conversation, I would approach it with like just curiosity. Just be like, hey, like this has been brought up. I wanted to just talk to you in private and just see like what's going on with your yoga practice. Like, how are you? How are things? What's going on in class? Like, what's happening? And just basically making them aware that this is something that you need to have a discussion about. But I think sometimes that alone can really change a situation. The person in my story that was swearing, that's all that it took. It was like, hey, like everyone's having their own practice. But if I'm like the owner and I'm practicing next to you and it's pulling me out of my practice, now we don't have an inclusive environment for everyone to be able to have their own experience. Like, what's going on? Is everything good? You know? And there was no conclusion. It just stopped then immediately from that. Carol, before you froze, I was saying 20 years yoga studio ownership. I'm sure you've seen all sorts of stuff. I wanted to spin it to you to comment. And then also you were talking about flash sales, and that relates to preparedness stuff as well.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Owning the studio for that long, we saw everything for sure. And I really enjoyed what you guys were saying about empowering the teachers for sure. I don't know if this was said, but I know in the post we talked about like making sure that it is a problem. Like that's the other thing too. And empowering the teachers can sometimes, I mean, we found there were certain teachers that got on a power trip as well. So, you know, there is this kind of level of, you know, making sure that one, is this an issue? Is it really affecting other people? Can we talk to them? We always talk to them one-on-one, you know, it was never, you know, like I don't know, like an email sometimes was necessary, but I think getting to the root of it was much easier when you're face-to-face. And there were times that I definitely pushed back to the teachers and the students, like both of them, you know, trying to find the right balance between those. Yeah, what was I going to say? Oh yeah, so preparedness. I've had a few people all of a sudden think, they'd say in my coaching calls, I'm going to do a class card sale like tomorrow. And we were talking about it and like, well, what is the point of this? Well, it's probably because you haven't been prepared with maybe some cash flow and that kind of thing. And so it's like reactionary. So all of the things we're talking about here is about being prepared, long-term thinking, forward thinking, you know, of all these things. And of course, you don't have a crystal ball. You know, we don't know, we cannot prepare for everything, but if there is a point at which you need some cash infusion, I think we would have some other ways to get that other than a class card sale. So it's just sort of another angle of that preparedness we were talking about beforehand. So, yeah.
Yeah. So maybe we should say first, like, why not do a class card sale? Because there is a place for that sometimes. But like, why would we say that maybe that shouldn't be your first resort if you have other options?
Well, I think what I've been seeing is that one, the owners are saying to me, well, my students really love it and they're expecting it. And one, you know, my response is, you've conditioned them to expect it. And of course they love it because it's class cards really cheap. You know, your price per class is really, really cheap and they're getting a great deal, but does it benefit the business, especially long-term? And that's the crux of it. Like, yeah, they love it, but how is that helping you as a business owner? So like you said, there is a time and a place, but if you need a quick cash infusion, there are definitely ways to make sure you're not pulling too many people off of your membership. Because, you know, we know that very balanced cash flow coming in each month from your monthly members is really beneficial to your business. And the class card flash sale can really kind of blow that up. Vicky?
Yeah, so it brings me back to the marketing summit we did last week, where every kind of event, every kind of sale, what is the goal? Are you clear on what the goal is with this? So what's the goal of having this sale? Is it to get some cash together? Because like you said, Carol, definitely better ways if you need cash. I've also seen how badly it can impact the studio. It's the studio that I was working with recently, and we did some KPIs for them because they had a really low sort of intro purchase rate. The newbies just weren't buying the intro. So we dug down into those numbers a little deeper to see, well, what are all these newbies? What are they buying then? And it was like almost a third of the people who were not buying the intro, who were new, they bought these discounted class cards. And it was terrible. So then, you know, then they have those cheap classes and they kind of save them up and they don't come often enough. They never create the real habit. They don't become members. And these were brand new people even. But again, this was something they did every single year at the same time of year. They always did this like 10-pack sale. And it was really not a good idea. And then since then, they stopped. They did not do it. So one year they just didn't do it. And now, you know, KPIs are going up. People are buying the first month offer. They are getting more members. It really, really helped to just stop doing this.
Yeah, I mean, to double down on what you're saying, Carol and Vicky, when you get into the habit of selling, it's like it's the entrepreneurial cash flow drug that then you like continue, like you sell and you see money come in. So like you get that dopamine hit of, oh, I pulled this lever and equals money in my business. So then you want to do it again, but it can really become a very detrimental cycle. And to Kay's point, like, it's not to say you don't ever do this. There is a time and place for it. It's just, it has to be very intelligently designed or it can really kind of shoot you in the foot. The most extreme example, there's a studio that, you know, I taught at for a while when I was building our last studio. I helped them finish some of their build at the time because it was just like an all hands on deck. Beautiful, enormous, super large investment build out, 2 enormous rooms. And for the first 5 years, it just was going up like this. And then to everyone's surprise, it just closed, like kind of out of the blue. And it looked like it was busy all the time. But when you looked at their numbers, they did a sale once a year because they opened up on a Valentine's Day. So they did this like insane deal thing in February. And the vast majority of people practicing only purchased during that month, or this one other time that they had a sale, I think around Black Friday. So this bottom line was like, they had people in the business and that those people were costing them money. And we don't normally look at it like that in a yoga studio, but just their dollars per class per person and their lifetime value was so low that they literally just couldn't afford to stay open. So after hundreds of thousands of dollars in investment and 5 years of effort, they had to shut the doors. And it was like a really terrible situation because it wasn't because there weren't people in practicing. Like it's like the worst reason to close. And a huge part of that, there were other factors, but a huge part of that was they sold heavily discounted class cards, which was very disruptive in the market at the time. But then you had full classes where you turn people away and people in the class paying like $3. And that's okay now and again, but like that was the business like accidentally calibrated to that. And that, yeah, it was very difficult.
Yeah, I wanted to add into that, like, so what we're identifying is, you know, the issues with selling these discounted class cards. It's like lower price per visit. And then also you're getting a chunk of cash now, but then depending on when they expire, you're not going to get any more money from that person for a while. And potentially it's like 60. Oh, wow. Zoom tells you to lower your hand now when you're, it's like, looks like you're talking already. Lower your freaking hand. Anyway, So you might not see any more cash from them for a year or 6 months. And so what are, like we mentioned, you know, there's sometimes a time to do a discounted class card. And then like, how can you mitigate the negative effects of doing that to your business? One thing that I'm thinking of is like in Mexico, it's very common that studios have primarily class cards because a lot of people like to pay in cash, depending on where you are. Like,
Yeah, it's only class cards. Yeah, comparatively.
Yeah. So, but what they do, it's like you buy 8 or 4 or 12, like you kind of choose your practice frequency usually, but it's only good for a month or like maybe 2 months. But that's one way that you can mitigate it, is just make it like you could sell a discounted 10-pack, but you got to use it in a month. So then even if it's a lower price per class, you're helping that person develop a certain practice frequency. And then it's going to be easier to upsell them onto your membership when that pass expires. So that's one thing you can do. Or you could also make it like a really small class pack so that the price point is lower, but the price per class is the same. So if you sell a 10-pack for $200, sell them a 3-pack for $60. So it's a lower price point than possibly anything else you offer, but you're still getting the same amount per class. And I would also have that one have a lower expiration date, like a month. Yeah, go ahead, Carol.
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to, like, I was thinking how when people have always done this, and the example studio that Josh was saying was what it made me think about it. But right now people are also talking about Black Friday, and they're thinking ahead. And they're like, well, I've always done this on Black Friday, XYZ, whatever it is, a sale. And I keep telling studios, like, just because you've done that before doesn't mean you have to do that again. And it doesn't really, like, don't feel pressure to do anything. I mean, like, yes, it's probably a good time to like feature something or do something, but maybe it's not Black Friday. Maybe it's a small business Saturday. Maybe it's like a spin on something, and maybe it's not classes that you're selling. Maybe it's, I don't know, gift cards or something else. Like, you can really there are lots of different ideas. And just because you've always done it doesn't mean you have to do it again.
So true. And that made me think of another way that you can mitigate the negative effects. If you do want to offer a discounted class card for like Black Friday, we would always just send that to people who only practiced like under 10 times that year, or people who already had a class pack that was like almost expiring and they're like a class pack person, you know, so you don't pull people off of your auto pay. And then, yeah, I agree with like offering other products, like something, if you offer like mat and towel service, you can like discount that and have people sign up for a year of it, and you'll still probably make a profit because it doesn't actually cost that much to wash some towels. So yeah, I know Vicky has to go to a call, and what's that, Josh?
I said, I don't know. I could spout off on that one. I agree with what you're saying in principle. Mat and towel service, though, we did a couple of studio studies, and it was like the actual cost of mat and towel service is a lot higher than we thought it was.
It's true. Yeah, it may be higher than you think. Yeah, you have to definitely crunch the numbers and go like, how often do people actually use this, and stuff like that. But that's just an example of like something that's not classes that you can create a discount around. Yeah. Oh my God, Black Friday. I'm like, wait, what? Carol's really early talking about this. Shit.
Like, wait, no, she's not. No, she's not.
No, she's not
It's coming up real fast. Yeah.
Maybe next week we can talk more about that and other ideas for what to do around that.
Yeah, we'll pick up some Black Friday conversation. I was going to go back to Carol. You know, you were talking about being intelligent and not undermining your cash flow from like pulling people off membership and stuff. So there's always like, you know, you pull this lever and then this moves, and so it's just like having that bigger picture. But one of the things that I think is undervalued in a studio, often it just like falls off of our radar, or falls off of owners' radars, is like what warm outreach looks like. So rather than being like, I need to have a public sale because September didn't go as I hoped, my rainy day fund isn't built up enough for me to like weather this for a minute. So like, quick, let's sell some stuff. You could be like, quick, let's sell some stuff, but do it behind the scenes. Like for most studios, after you're operating for a few years, at almost any point in time, there's 10 clients or 20 clients that you could go to and be like, hey, here's a special offer for you. And like really cherry pick it. And that changes the dynamic of things. It's not that you want to be wheeling and dealing every month, but it just, you are empowered to do that. And you might be surprised how well that works. And then when we talk about sales in general, we talked about this at the event marketing summit. And then also when we talk Black Friday, I'm sure we'll bring this up again. What's your goal with your sale? So like, if you're coming up a little short in a yoga studio, my experience is you're not coming up short hundreds of dollars. You're coming up short a few thousands of dollars, right? So let's say easy numbers like $5,000. Well, is it easier to sell 5 things at $1,000 a pop to get $5,000, or to sell 50 things at $100 a pop? Because it doesn't matter what the, what the deal is. It's just always going to be harder to sell 50 of something than it is to sell 5. So that's that manual outreach. Like, you need $5,000, go find 5 people and sell them an annual, like upgrade them. Find the person who's been practicing with you for 2 years and they practice 7 to 12 times a month and they're happily, firmly in there, and just directly go to them and be like, hey, okay, you've been practicing with us forever. You've unlocked the cheat code level, the special Easter egg after the credits situation. Get an annual for $1,000. And like, the discounts have to be super crazy heavy or something, but for them, it's like, it just makes sense. If you made that offer to 10 people, I bet you'd get half of them, but you're picking the right person. It's more surgical in the way that you do that. Flash sales. Standard occurrence. I think they're coming back. That's the only other comment I would make. Like, they felt like they were a thing of the past, and then now I'm seeing and hearing about them in studios a lot more. I don't know what that is, but
there's a place for it. Like, if you do need to come up with some cash for something that you weren't prepared for, and the alternative is like put it on a maxed out credit card, then with like 25% interest, you might be better. But all the things we talked about, like limiting them to a specific group of clients, whether that means you're doing like direct warm outreach or you're just sending the email only to class pack people, limiting the expiration date, limiting the number you sell, right? I don't know if we talked about that yet, but like, there's only 5 of these available because that's how much money I need. And
right, that creates the scarcity and the urgency on it too.
Yeah, and it saves you from like if you are going to send the offer to your entire list, at least if you're okay with like pulling 5 people off of auto pay so that you can get them to pay for a year for $1,000 and you have that cash, then it's always a trade-off. So just like in the big picture of what we're talking about, right? Like, it's a trade-off. If you're not prepared with 3 months of cash, then the trade-off is then you have to have these other plans in place. Like, what do you do in case something you're not prepared for?
Well, and I would say to studio owners, and I'm massively stereotyping, not everyone does this, but as you're on your entrepreneurial journey running a yoga studio, it would be very typical that owners calibrate towards putting themselves at risk for the sake of promoting, for the sake of like their staff and the studio and the students, which just shows how heart-centered yoga studio owners are, generally speaking. And that's really a powerful place to operate from. But it cannot, in the bigger picture and the longer term of things, it might not work out, in the best way for you to support everyone the way you think you are. The reason I'm saying that is, like, you brought up credit cards, like going into a bunch of credit card debt that you're not going to be able to pay off in the foreseeable future or something, versus let's have this surgical approach and sell some things to solve this problem. The latter is always going to work out better for you. It doesn't mean you're never going to use your credit card, whatever, to float something. It's just, being smart about it, I guess. One really specific thing, this is applicable to a large portion of studio owners out there, but maybe not everyone, is the people who are on ClassPass. We have studios that have, if you go into their system, over the last just 1 year of time, have had 1,000 people from ClassPass come into their studio. That's a large group of people. And if we look at the conversion rate typically on ClassPass. Now, once we put some of our systems in place in the YC, it goes up, like we usually double it actually. But until systems are in place, ClassPass conversion is like below 5% in most studios. Most studios we see like 2-3%. It's abysmal. Now it's easy to blame ClassPass on that, but here's the other thought. You need to generate some cash. You don't want to undermine your existing community. Who's the warm audience that you have direct outbound marketing availability to? Got 1,000 ClassPass people, like that's who you sell that discounted 10-pack to, because they're already not a cash flowing asset in your business. And also you're playing a longer game. If I buy a 5-pack pass from you and I'm on ClassPass, and that means that in the next 2 months, I go from twice a month where I use like exactly the credits I have available in my ClassPass to 5 or 6. And now I'm like, wait a minute, I really like it here. Like that's how you convert ClassPass people. It's a longer game that you're playing. You're just trying to get their frequency up. So that would be an example of where, because you're going at that targeted group, you can make an offer that you might not otherwise always make. Yeah. All right. Preparedness, orgasms in yoga classes, flash sales. We covered a lot of ground today. Friday the 13th, you know, this was a good one for this. What do you guys think about it? Leave us a comment down below on what's something that you've done to prepare in any way in your business that then you used, that then you're like, oh, thank goodness I've got this, I'm covered. Are we missing something? Those are the stories that we don't share. Let's brag about it a little bit. Tell us how awesome you are. Post in the comments down below and hear about it.
Do it and then go do some yoga.
And then go do some yoga. All right, you guys, have a great weekend. Oh, last thing before I forget, there is, technically we're sold out, but there is one bed at the Yoga Business Summit Annual Visionary Retreat. It is a shared accommodation bed, but there is one left. So if you're on the fence or you're thinking about coming, the answer is yes, you should definitely do it. Send us a note, comment down below. I'm interested, and I will send you all of the details on it, or let any of your coaches know. We'd love to have you there.
Right.
All right. That's it for now. Have a great weekend. Peace.
How do you do the balloons?